It's October. Halloween is approaching. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a spooky game. One where you can play vampires, werewolves, ghosts. No, not that one. Grab your trowels, because today we are digging up the everlasting. "1991 is a really important year for tabletop gaming because that's the year that White Wolf released the first edition of Vampire the Masquerade. This has been one of the most important tabletop games of all time. Up to this point, most games have been based on science fiction and fantasy, but Vampire went straight for the jugular with gothic horror. Taking inspiration from works like Dracula or Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, this was a new experience in gaming, one where you weren't the hero, one where you were the monster, and you had to decide what that was going to mean for you. Being based on a different body of work, it also attracted a different audience. Women in particular were at the time far more likely to be found playing Vampire than a more conventional game of Dungeons and Dragons. It also revolutionised LARP. LARP was still pretty new at this point, but for the most part it involved what you'd think of as LARP, people dressing up in medieval costumes and having fights with foam swords. With their mind's eye theatre system, White Wolf created a new kind of LARP, one where you could wear your regular clothes, albeit generally with a bit of a goth twist, and didn't have to get into any fights that didn't involve a quick game of rock, paper, scissors anyway. White Wolf did not sit on their laurels with Vampire the Masquerade. They rapidly followed up, each year bringing out a new game, covering other gothic horror and urban fantasy tropes like werewolves, wizards, fairies, ghosts. And all of these games were set in the same game world, the world of darkness. And they all used the same system, the storyteller system, which meant that once you'd learned one, it was really very easy to go and pick up another one and be up and running playing it in a very short space of time. And something that a lot of people did back then was look at all these games using the same setting and system and think, wouldn't it be amazing to do a big crossover game where we combine all of these 4 or 5 different games into one and have characters from all of them interacting together? And if, like me, you've tried it, you'll know that the answer is kind of. In fact, let's ask one of my characters what she thinks about it. Meredith, what's your opinion?
Hello there, I'm Meredith. I'm a slewer. That's a kind of changeling. I'm a fairy spirit in a human body, an inherently magical creature. But when it comes to actually doing spells, my mage friends can kick my arse. And as for werewolves, well, they can literally kick my arse. And vampires, well, even if they don't eat me, if I hang around them too long, I'll turn back into a human.
So attempts at crossover games were troubled by issues with power balance and the fundamental incompatibility of certain character types. Which isn't to say that we didn't have a lot of fun with these crossover games, just that they really did have some issues. And White Wolf did become aware of these issues. And accordingly, when they brought out their new World of Darkness line, the one that was later renamed Chronicles of Darkness, the first book that came out was just World of Darkness, the base setting, the base rules, and all of the individual games, vampire, werewolf, etc., these are all built on top of that initial system. And this one was built from the ground up to be good for crossovers. You could have vampires and werewolves in the same game and it would work. I did play a few games that worked this way and, well, they did work. There was just one little problem. which is that the New World of Darkness didn't come out until 2004. That was a very long wait, and some people were not prepared to wait that long. One of those people was Stephen Brown. Stephen C. Brown was a game designer and writer, and if you're familiar with early White Wolf products, then you might recognise his name. He did a lot of work on the Vampire the Masquerade line, particularly things involving the Sabbat. His name does also pop up on a few other White Wolf products, including Werewolf. So he really knew his stuff when it came to this particular kind of urban fantasy gothic horror roleplay game. And it's clear that the fact that these games didn't cross over was a problem for him. He wanted a game that did, and he was not prepared to wait for White Wolf's New World of Darkness for that to happen. He was going to do it himself. And he did. He started his company, Visionary Entertainment, and produced his book. Here it is, The Book of the Unliving. This came out in 1997, and by 1997 standards, this is a pretty solid piece of work. It's a big format paperback, which was pretty normal at the time. It's got a nice colour cover. If we take a look on the inside, you can see it is a black and white layout. It's got a nice bit of page design, black and white illustrations. It's a pretty nice piece of work. Looking at today, it looks a bit 90s, but then it is from the 90s. That was the Book of the Unliving. This one has the rules for vampires. But it's not just vampires. There are also ghouls, which are somewhat Lovecraftian in their nature. There are revenants, which are pretty much straight out of The Crow. When you read this book, it is obvious how much passion Stephen C. Brown had for his work. The amount of research he's done on the vampires is truly spectacular, and unlike the bloodlines in Vampire the Masquerade, these are all based on real-world vampire myths. So you've got the Dracula line, the Elizabeth Bathory line, but he's also looked up different vampire myths from around the world and included bloodlines based on things that are, well, some of them I'd never even heard of before. Much like White Wolf, Stephen Brown did not hang about. The following year, more books appeared. We have the Book of the Spirits, and very soon after that, the Book of the Light. In these books you'll find werewolves, wizards, and a few things you might not be expecting, like gargoyles. Again, the quality of research is spectacular. He has really, really put the work in. This game was hitting all the right notes. It would let you play the things that you could play in the World of Darkness, but you could play them in that big crossover game that you wanted without the horrendous issues of power imbalance. The game did pick up a small, extremely loyal fan base. And that fan base is in fact the reason that the fourth book exists. Books 1 to 3 are pretty much entirely the work of Stephen C. Brown. But this one, you'll find another name, and that name is Chip Dobbs. I can't tell you exactly what happened at Visionary Entertainment that prevented Stephen Brown from bringing out his fourth book. It wasn't until superfan Chip Dobbs bought out Visionary Entertainment that book 4 appeared. It's still Stephen Brown as the author, but now Chip Dobbs is appearing doing the layout, and, as far as I can tell, financing the thing. 2 more books were produced after book 4, supplements for the base game, and then the whole thing sank without a trace. Tune in next time to find out why.